Daniel Harper believed some things in life did not need checking. Trust was one of them. That afternoon began like any other. The sky over Chicago was gray, rain falling in thin lines that blurred the tall buildings. Daniel finished his last meeting early, shut down his computer, and slipped on his coat. His mind was already drifting home, to the quiet apartment he shared with Claire, to dinner plans they hadn't fully decided on yet. As he stepped into the hallway, his phone vibrated. A voicemail notification. From Emily. Daniel slowed his walk. Emily usually texted. Voice messages meant something serious or something emotional. He pressed play while standing near the elevator doors. Her voice was soft but tight, like she was holding her breath. Hey, Dan, call me when you can. It's important. The message ended too quickly. Daniel stared at the phone for a second longer than usual. Emily was his younger sister, the one who laughed loudly, talked fast, and never sounded unsure. This version of her felt unfamiliar. He called her back immediately. Straight to voicemail. The elevator doors opened. Daniel stepped inside, the doors sliding shut with a quiet thud. As he descended, a small knot formed in his chest. He told himself she was probably overthinking something again. She always did. Outside, the rain had picked up. Daniel walked quickly to his car, shoulders slightly hunched, his thoughts already spinning. He checked his phone again. No new messages. During the drive home, the city lights reflected on the wet streets. Traffic was heavy, but Daniel barely noticed. Emily's voice replayed in his head again and again. It's important. He pulled into the garage under their apartment building and parked. As he rode the elevator up, he sent a text to Claire. Heading home. You there? No reply. That wasn't strange. Claire sometimes left her phone in her bag while working. Still, something about the silence felt heavier tonight. When Daniel unlocked the apartment door, the quiet greeted him first. The living room lights were off. No music played. The air felt still. Claire, he called out. No answer. He stepped inside, dropped his keys on the counter, and looked around. Her shoes weren't by the door. Her coat wasn't hanging on the hook. Daniel checked the clock. 7:30 p.m. She should have been home by now. He sent another text. Everything okay? Again, nothing. Daniel sighed and ran a hand through his hair. He poured himself a glass of water and leaned against the counter, trying to relax. He reminded himself that Claire was independent. She didn't check in every hour. He respected that about her. Still, his chest felt tight. His phone rang. Emily. Hey, Daniel said quickly. What's going on? There was a pause on the other end. Then Emily spoke, her voice quieter than before. Can you come over? Now? Yes. Daniel straightened. Emily, you're scaring me. I'm sorry, she said. I need to talk to you in person. Daniel looked toward the hallway that led to their bedroom, then back at the front door. Is everything okay? Emily hesitated. I don't know. That answer settled heavily between them. I'll be there, Daniel said. Give me 20 minutes. He hung up and stood there for a moment, staring at the blank wall. Whatever Emily wanted to say, it didn't feel small. As he grabbed his jacket, his phone buzzed again. A message. But it wasn't from Claire. It was a missed call notification from an unknown number. Daniel frowned, then shook it off. Probably spam. He stepped back out into the rain. The drive to Emily's place felt longer than usual. The streets were slick, headlights glowing through the mist. Daniel's thoughts raced ahead of him, imagining every possible reason for Emily's call. Family trouble. Work stress. Something with her boyfriend. He avoided the one thought trying to push its way forward. When he arrived, Emily opened the door before he could knock. Her eyes were red. Her smile didn't reach them. "Hey," Daniel said softly. She stepped aside to let him in. The apartment smelled like cold coffee. The lights were dim, curtains half drawn. Emily folded her arms, pacing once before stopping in front of him. "I didn't want to tell you over the phone," she said. "I didn't know how." Daniel's heart started beating faster. "Tell me what?" She took a deep breath. "I saw Claire today." Daniel blinked. "Okay." "At Riverfront Cafe. Around lunchtime." Daniel relaxed slightly. "She works near there." Emily shook her head. "She wasn't working." Daniel frowned. "What do you mean?" "She was with someone." The words landed softly but carried weight. "Like a client?" Daniel asked, already trying to protect the idea of Claire in his mind. Emily's eyes filled again. "No." Silence filled the room. Daniel waited. "They were holding hands," Emily said. "Laughing. Sitting close." Daniel felt the room tilt. He steadied himself by leaning against the back of a chair. "You're sure it was her?" Emily nodded. "I was close enough to hear her laugh. I know her voice." Daniel swallowed hard. "Maybe it was just a friend." Emily shook her head slowly. "Dan," he brushed her hair behind her ear. The image burned into his mind without permission. "Did you talk to her?" Daniel asked. "No." "I panicked. I left." Daniel nodded, his jaw tight. He didn't trust his voice right now. "I'm sorry," Emily said. "I didn't want to hurt you." Daniel forced a small smile. "You didn't. I just need time." He stood up after a few minutes, telling Emily he needed to go home. She hugged him tightly before he left, whispering, "Whatever happens, I'm here." The drive back felt different. Slower. He noticed every red light, every reflection in the windows. At the apartment, the lights were on now. Claire stood in the kitchen, rinsing a mug. "Hey," she said, smiling. "You're home." Daniel studied her face. She looked normal. Calm. Familiar. "Where were you?" he asked carefully. "Out," she said easily. "Busy day." Daniel nodded. He didn't ask anything else. As he walked down the hallway, the sound of running water behind him, he felt something shift deep inside his chest. For the first time, trust no longer felt solid. It felt fragile. And Daniel knew, even before sleep refused to come that night, that whatever Emily had seen was only the beginning. Daniel drove to Emily's apartment faster than usual, the city lights reflecting off the wet pavement like streaks of gold and silver. Rain drummed against the windshield, a soft, steady rhythm that made his mind race even faster. His chest felt tight, a mix of fear and anticipation. Whatever Emily had seen with Claire, it wasn't going to be easy to hear. When he arrived, Emily opened the door almost immediately. Her hair was damp from the drizzle outside, and her eyes were red, the corners glistening as though she had been crying. She stepped aside silently and let him in. The apartment was dimly lit, the low lamp in the corner casting shadows across the room. The tension was thick, Daniel could feel it pressing against his chest. "Hey," he said softly, his voice calm but unsure. "What's going on?" Emily hesitated. She looked away for a moment, twisting her fingers together as if searching for the right words. "I didn't want to say this over the phone," she started. "And I don't even know how to say it now." Daniel's stomach knotted. He had expected a serious conversation, maybe some news about work, or a problem she couldn't handle alone. But the way she said it, it felt different. Heavy, important. He stepped closer. Just tell me." She took a deep breath and finally met his gaze. "I saw Claire today." Daniel froze for a second. "Okay," his tone was cautious, like testing the ground before stepping forward. "At Riverfront Cafe. Around lunch." Daniel tried to keep calm. Claire had gone there before, meeting colleagues, grabbing a quick coffee on hectic days. But Emily's hesitation told him this wasn't ordinary. She wasn't alone, Emily continued, her voice quiet but urgent. Daniel blinked. Not alone? With who? Emily's lips pressed into a thin line. A man. Sitting really close. Laughing. Holding hands. The words hit Daniel with a sudden force, sharper than he expected. He swallowed. Are you sure it was her? Emily nodded firmly. I was 10 feet away. I know it was Claire. And he brushed her hair back behind her ear. It wasn't a normal gesture between friends. Daniel's chest tightened. He struggled to process the scene Emily described. Every memory of the past months replayed, Claire stepping out for private calls, smiling at her phone, working late more than usual. It had all seemed innocent, or at least explainable. But this? Did you talk to her? He asked, almost afraid of the answer. No. I panicked. I left, Emily admitted. Her hand shook slightly as she spoke. I thought maybe I was wrong, but I know what I saw. Daniel leaned against the wall, running a hand over his face. He tried to tell himself she could be mistaken, that perhaps the man was a relative, a friend, someone he didn't know. But the way Emily described it, the closeness, the laughter, the gesture of brushing her hair, it didn't feel like a misunderstanding. He exhaled slowly. I should probably talk to her first, he said, trying to convince himself as much as Emily. She shook her head. I didn't want to get involved directly. I had to tell you. The room fell quiet. The low hum of the radiator was the only sound. Daniel's mind raced, trying to anticipate the confrontation ahead, but also fearing what he might find. Finally, he nodded. Okay. Thanks for telling me, Em. I need to handle this. Emily gave a small, sad smile. Be careful, Dan. I hate that it's like this. He left her apartment with a knot in his chest that refused to untangle. The streets glistened with rain, and Daniel barely noticed as he drove back home. Each red light felt like a pause in a movie, giving him too much time to think. He imagined Claire smiling at another man, laughing in a way that was intimate and unreserved. His heart thumped painfully in his chest, but he forced himself to focus on the drive. When he reached his apartment, the door was unlocked. Claire's coat hung in its usual spot, her shoes neatly lined up. The apartment smelled faintly of coffee, as it always did in the mornings. But the normalcy of it all felt like a lie. Daniel stepped inside, careful not to make any sudden movements. He wanted to see her, to confront her, to demand an explanation, but the fear of the unknown made him hesitant. Claire, he called out softly. She emerged from the kitchen, wiping a mug with a towel. Her hair was tied back, and she smiled when she saw him. Hey, you're home early. Daniel paused. He studied her face, looking for any sign of guilt, any hint of what Emily had told him. He didn't see it, not immediately. She seemed calm, familiar. The woman he loved, the person he trusted completely, was standing right there. Yeah. Long day, he replied, his voice steady even though his mind raced. Claire tilted her head slightly, smiling faintly. Want some coffee? Daniel shook his head, trying to focus. Every instinct screamed at him to ask the question, to confront her. But something held him back. Maybe it was the fear of the answer, or maybe it was the last shred of trust he didn't want to break completely. Instead, he said quietly, I'm tired. I think I'll lie down. Claire nodded, returning to the sink. Okay. Daniel walked down the hallway toward the bedroom. His chest felt heavy, and a cold tension settled over him. He didn't know what he was going to do next. Part of him wanted to confront her immediately. Part of him wanted to run. Part of him wanted to deny what Emily had told him, to pretend it hadn't happened. He lay down on the bed, staring at the ceiling. The apartment was quiet except for the soft hum of the refrigerator. For the first time in years, Daniel felt uncertain. He had always trusted Claire completely, as if nothing could shake that trust. But now, every memory, every laugh, every smile felt fragile. He realized trust could be broken quietly, almost invisibly, before anyone even noticed. Outside, the rain continued, relentless and steady, drumming against the windows like a reminder that life was changing, whether he was ready for it or not. Daniel closed his eyes, but sleep wouldn't come. The image of Claire with another man, the gesture Emily had described, replayed in his mind, refusing to let him rest. He didn't know how he would face her tomorrow. He didn't know if he could. He only knew one thing: the world he had believed in, the life he had built with Claire, had shifted in ways he couldn't control. And the person he trusted most might not be the person he thought she was. And for the first time, Daniel felt the fragile, trembling edge of betrayal brush against his heart. It was only the beginning. Daniel didn't sleep that night. Not a minute. He lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling, listening to the faint hum of the city outside his window. Every small sound, Claire's soft breathing, the occasional car on the street, felt amplified, like the apartment itself was holding its breath. He kept thinking about what Emily had told him. Claire, laughing, holding hands, brushing her hair back for another man. His mind ran through every memory of their relationship, trying to reconcile it with the image Emily had described. By morning, Daniel knew he couldn't wait any longer. He had to see for himself. The uncertainty was gnawing at him, relentless. He got dressed quickly, pulling on a jacket over a t-shirt, and left his apartment without a word. The city was quiet for early morning, fog drifting low over Lake Michigan. Daniel followed Claire's usual route to work, not too closely, just enough to watch her movements without being noticed. Claire didn't go to her office. Daniel's stomach tightened as he saw her turn off into a small park near the lake. He parked a block away, heart pounding. She wasn't alone for long. A man stepped out of a car parked nearby, tall, with a dark jacket and an easy confidence. Daniel's chest contracted. This was real. He hadn't imagined it. Claire smiled as she approached the man, a warmth in her eyes that made Daniel's stomach twist. They didn't kiss, didn't touch in a way that screamed passion, but the intimacy in their gestures, the closeness, the laughter, it was unmistakable. The man brushed his hand lightly across hers as they talked. Daniel felt like the ground had shifted under him. He gritted his teeth, gripping the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white. Something inside him snapped. He knew he couldn't drive away, couldn't pretend he didn't see it. He stepped out of the car and walked toward them, the rain cooling his face, the mist rising off the lake. Claire's head turned, and for a moment, her eyes met his. Recognition. Shock. Daniel, she said, her voice soft, unsure. The man froze, glancing between them, clearly confused. I can go, he said, stepping back slightly. No, Claire replied quickly. Then she looked at Daniel, her eyes wide. We need to talk. Daniel crossed his arms, the cold wind brushing against his face. How long? Claire hesitated, swallowing hard. A few months. The words struck him harder than he expected. He felt his knees weaken for a second, like the ground beneath him had disappeared. He wanted to shout, to demand an explanation, but the words stuck in his throat. Why? He finally asked, his voice quieter than he wanted, but edged with pain. Claire's gaze dropped. I didn't plan for it to happen, she said. It just happened. Daniel shook his head slowly, his chest tightening. That's not an answer. I was lonely, she whispered, almost a confession. You were always working. Always tired. I felt invisible. He stared at her, pain and disbelief warring inside him. So instead of talking to me, instead of telling me, you found someone else? Tears ran down her cheeks, but she didn't move away. I didn't mean to hurt you, she said. Daniel laughed, a soft, bitter sound. But you did. The man by the bench cleared his throat again, awkwardly. Claire waved him away, almost gently, but Daniel could see the hesitation in her movements. "I care about you, Daniel," she said, voice trembling. "I do. But things changed. And I can't go back." Daniel's chest felt heavy, like someone had pressed on it. "Changed how?" I've been falling for him," she admitted, voice quiet but steady. The words hit Daniel like a gust of icy wind. Everything he had planned, every dream, every quiet night imagining a future together, it felt like it had been erased. He wanted to scream, to fight, to make sense of it all, but there were no words that could fix this. Claire stepped closer, but Daniel instinctively backed away. He didn't recognize the woman standing in front of him. Not the one he had trusted. Not the one he had loved. Her eyes, once full of warmth and familiarity, now seemed distant, a reflection of a life he could no longer reach. "I trusted you," he said, voice breaking, the first crack in his calm. "I know," she whispered, and Daniel saw the regret in her eyes, but it didn't soften the blow. The rain picked up, cold drops splattering against his jacket, soaking through quickly. Daniel felt numb. Not angry, not ready to forgive, just hollow, drained, as though the world had pulled the color out of everything he loved. Claire reached for his hand, but he stepped back again. "Don't," he said quietly. "Just don't." She flinched but didn't argue. Her shoulders slumped. The man at the bench waited silently, awkward, unsure if he should intervene. Claire gave him a look, a silent apology, and he finally walked away, leaving the two of them alone. Daniel stood there, chest heaving, rain plastering his hair to his forehead. The wind carried the faint sound of the lake lapping at the shore. He tried to hold on to the memories of Claire that had felt real, the quiet evenings, the laughter, the comfort. But those memories now felt like someone else's story. Claire tried to speak again. "Daniel. I wish I could explain better. I never meant to." "Save it," he said, cutting her off gently but firmly. "Just leave me alone for a while." She nodded, tears streaming, her lips pressed together to keep from speaking. She walked away slowly, not turning back, leaving Daniel standing in the rain, the cold seeping into his bones. He didn't move for a long time. The park was empty, the benches slick with rain. Daniel's heart ached, but not in the sharp, angry way he had imagined. It was a slow, steady pain that settled deep inside, a reminder that trust, once broken, could never be replaced. Eventually, he turned and walked back to his car, soaked, shivering, numb. The city looked different now, even familiar streets seemed strange, shadowed with betrayal. Every step felt heavy, each breath a reminder that his life had shifted in a way he couldn't control. When he finally reached his apartment, he didn't go inside. He sat in his car for a long time, staring at the rain-soaked streets. He thought about Claire, about what he had lost, about how someone he trusted completely had changed his world in a single afternoon. For the first time, Daniel realized that love wasn't just about affection, about shared laughs or quiet nights. It was about trust, loyalty, honesty. And when those things were broken, everything else felt meaningless. He finally started the car and drove away. The city blurred past him in streaks of light, but Daniel didn't notice. He didn't have answers. He didn't know if he would ever forgive Claire. But he knew one thing, his life would never be the same. For Daniel Harper, the person he trusted most had revealed a truth he couldn't unsee. A truth that left him standing in the cold rain, alone, facing the reality that sometimes, love changes not because it ends, but because it shifts in ways we cannot control. And in that quiet, soaked drive through Chicago, Daniel understood something else. He had to start moving forward, even if he didn't yet know how. Daniel moved out 2 weeks later. Not in anger, not in a rush, but in quiet determination. The apartment he had shared with Claire, the space that had once felt like home, now felt like a museum of broken trust. He packed his things slowly, methodically, treating every object with care. He didn't want to smash anything, didn't want to leave reminders of anger behind. Every shirt folded, every book packed, was a small step away from a life that no longer belonged to him. Claire watched silently, tears in her eyes, as he carried boxes to the door. She didn't beg, didn't protest. She just stood there, shoulders hunched, the woman he loved standing as a stranger. "I'm sorry," she whispered at one point, but Daniel only nodded. He didn't argue, didn't shout. The words weren't needed. The act of leaving was the answer itself. When he hugged her goodbye, it was brief and careful. Neither of them clung. It was a single, fleeting acknowledgement of what had been, a quiet farewell. He stepped out of the apartment and felt the weight of emptiness settle over him. For the first time in years, Daniel was truly alone, and the silence around him was both heavy and strangely liberating. Daniel found a small apartment near the river, a modest place that felt like a fresh start. The first few days were the hardest. He wandered through rooms that weren't filled with shared memories, stared out windows at streets he didn't associate with love or betrayal. Nights were long, empty, but the city's quiet hum outside offered a strange comfort. He took up running in the mornings along the river walk, rain or shine. Each step felt like shedding a layer of grief, a method of reclaiming himself piece by piece. The wind off the lake bit at his face, the chill sharp against his cheeks, and he realized that even the discomfort was grounding. It reminded him that he was alive, that he could endure, that he could rebuild. One chilly evening, as the first hints of autumn gold appeared in the trees lining the streets, Daniel wandered into a quiet bookstore in a neighborhood he hadn't explored before. He moved through the aisles absent-mindedly, his fingers brushing over the spines of books, letting the quiet and the scent of paper settle him. He reached for a novel just as another hand reached for the same book. "Oh, sorry," said a soft voice. Daniel looked up. A woman with kind eyes and a gentle smile stood in front of him. "No, go ahead," he said, and she shook her head. "I'm Rachel," she said. "Daniel," he replied. They laughed softly over the coincidence, and a conversation began about the book, the author, favorite lines. It was easy, effortless, a small, welcome distraction from months of heartache. They moved from the bookstore to a nearby coffee shop. Words came naturally. Stories of their lives, shared experiences, hopes and regrets. The conversation was simple but real, like a slow sunrise after a long, dark night. Rachel didn't push him, didn't demand explanations or timelines. She listened. When Daniel eventually told her about Claire, about the betrayal, about the months of pain and uncertainty, she didn't interrupt, didn't judge. "That must have been hard," she said gently, her hand brushing over his on the table. The gesture was calm, steady, safe. Daniel realized, slowly, that this was the difference. Rachel wasn't trying to fill a void. She wasn't a replacement or a distraction. She was someone willing to walk alongside him, someone who respected his scars without trying to erase them. Weeks turned into months. Daniel's mornings by the river became a routine of strength and clarity. His runs weren't just for physical exercise, they were a meditation, a way to process grief and rebuild trust in himself. He returned to the bookstore often, and Rachel became a constant presence in his life. They laughed over small things, walked through the city streets without hurry, and slowly, without force, Daniel found himself caring for her in a way that felt honest and grounded. One evening, they walked together through the streets lit by the soft glow of streetlights. Snow had started falling lightly, settling on rooftops and pavements. Daniel felt the chill in his chest ease, replaced by a cautious warmth. He thought about Claire, about the heartbreak, and understood that the pain had shaped him. It had taught him to value honesty, patience, and respect in love. Rachel squeezed his hand gently, and he realized he was no longer afraid of trust. Not fully, not blindly, but carefully, deliberately. The experience with Claire had left scars, yes, but it had also given him perspective. He knew what he deserved. He knew that love wasn't about convenience or avoidance. It was about presence, honesty, and mutual care. Daniel stopped in the middle of the quiet street, letting the snow settle on his shoulders. He looked at Rachel beside him and felt a small, steady hope growing inside him. Not promises, not certainty, but possibility. The kind of possibility that allowed him to breathe fully again. He thought about the past months, Emily's warning, the painful discovery, the confrontation in the park, the nights alone in his apartment. Each moment had been a lesson, harsh but necessary. He understood now that life could change in an instant, that trust could be broken, and love could shift. But he also understood that new beginnings were possible, that healing was possible, that someone could come into his life and walk beside him without taking advantage of the scars he carried. Rachel smiled up at him, her eyes reflecting the glow of the streetlights. Daniel returned the smile, tentative but genuine. He realized that the life he had imagined with Claire was over, and that it was okay. The heartbreak had been real, but it had not defined him. What defined him now was his willingness to continue, to open his heart carefully, to choose someone who chose him back. They continued walking, snow crunching underfoot, hands intertwined, talking quietly about trivial things, books, music, the coming winter. Daniel felt grounded in the moment, aware that the past would always be a part of him, but no longer controlling him. He could love again, but differently, with awareness and patience. By the time they reached Rachel's apartment, the snow had turned the city into a quiet, peaceful world. Daniel felt a rare calm settling in his chest, a quiet sense that maybe, finally, he was ready to live fully again. Not without scars, not without memory, but with hope, trust, and the possibility of real connection. That night, Daniel returned to his own apartment, quiet, warm, and reflective. He realized that life had changed him irrevocably. The person he had trusted most had hurt him deeply, but that experience had taught him the value of honesty, self-respect, and careful love. He understood that heartbreak could be transformative, and that sometimes, endings were necessary for beginnings to take root. Daniel looked out the window at the snowy city, breathing in the cold, crisp air. He felt gratitude for the lessons, even the painful ones. And as he prepared for the night, he knew that he had found not just love again, but a version of himself stronger, wiser, and ready for the possibilities ahead. In the quiet of his apartment, Daniel Harper understood something profoundly simple: trusting someone could break you, but it could also guide you toward the people and the life that were meant to be. And walking beside Rachel through the softly falling snow, he felt that fragile, beautiful hope that comes when a heart finally begins to heal.